Welcome to the wonderful world of dance, bringing you exclusive interviews with top dancers and choreographers and reviews of the world's best companies across the globe. You can find lots more on our website at thewonderfulworldofdance.com.
Hi, this is Savannah Saunders from The Wonderful World of Dance, and today I'm so excited to introduce Stuart Waters, a cutting-edge dance theatre creator and performance artist who has been creating powerful dance theatre in the UK for 20 years. Stuart is bringing his new, exciting autobiographical work called Rockbottom to theatres in the UK. He's starting off at one of London's really important theatres here called The Place. For those outside of London and across the world, it's a space where we see some of the most exciting work that is emerging. And with 20 years behind Stuart's career to date, we've got some very exciting work to look forward to. So hi, Stuart. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for those who aren't familiar, perhaps around the world, how would you describe dance theatre to someone who may not quite recognise what that is?
Well, I find the term dance theatre quite an interesting one anyway. In the first place, I think it's quite a fast evolving art form that takes on a lot of different looks. I think some are more movement based than others, whereas others may be taking on lots of different influences. So, I guess in the aspect of the work that I'm doing, you could say that the work sits somewhere between theatre and dance. Even though dance is still part of theatre, I still think, there's a fine line between the amount of movement there is, as well as text and character work as well.
And you've got a real solid background in contemporary dance. When did you start dancing and why?
When did I start?
Yeah.
I actually started in school plays, actually, so it feels a little bit like my relationship with movement and dance and theatre is all sort of going full circle. But I started quite young at school, and then I just started to get much more into pure movement, and moved a little bit away from drama and theatre studies, and started becoming more interested in just moving. And then I guess my interests became more and more specific, and I wanted to train technically and become a more proficient technical dancer. So I kind of went on to do my A-levels, which led me to the Northern School of Contemporary Dance, which is where I did my full technical training back in the mid-90s.
Yes, and then you went on to the London School of Contemporary Dance, with another prestigious dance training.
That was much later down the line. I did, for goodness me, I guess that was probably now nearly 8 or 9 years ago. I did my MA, so it was after a bit of touring and working with lots of different companies and touring around the world. I wanted to sort of revisit dance in a more academic way. So I went, 15, 18 years later back.
Interesting.
And did my master's at London School of Contemporary Dance, which was a really good thing to do, to sort of reflect back on what I've done so far and think about how I might want to progress as a dance artist.
And tell us about some of the companies that you've worked with. So there's some, again, renowned companies here in the UK, like Protein Dance and Motion House, and interestingly, Wired Aerial Theatre, so getting back to some of your more sort of theatre work. Tell us about your experiences with those companies. I've spent quite a long time working with both those companies. I think I was with Motion House for 3 years. I think I worked with Luca Silvestrini and Protein Dance over a 5-year period, and Wide Aerial has been a much wider spectrum of time. I still do bits of work with them, so that's probably over a 10-year period. Both of those, all of those companies are bringing in lots and lots of different elements in terms of set and use of props. So it started to move a little bit more away just from pure movement and more into
themed shows, and emotional work with protein dance. And wide area theatre is always much more varied, so that takes on lots of different looks. So making theatre and making theatrical pieces, but with different apparatus such as bungee out or 5 or 8 meters in the air. So bringing in different apparatus, but still trying to make a little piece of theatre rather than something that's so tricksy, for example. So all of those companies, I guess, we were pulling on different, I suppose you could say, a more theatrical use of performance, so that the movement base and the movement technique is sort of the baseline to the performance, and then the theme or the character, it kind of gets laid on top of everything else. So primarily all the performers are dancers, but dancers that then that I would work with in those companies all have a variety of other skills that you can use theatrically on top of a strong dance base.
And as a dancer and a creator yourself, when did you sort of first become interested in creating your own work?
I think on reflection, I've never really seen myself as a choreographer, but then looking back over my career so far, I've always enjoyed working with youth dance and like centre of arts training schemes and universities where in between performing I would work with groups to create work that they would perform, and I'd always really enjoyed those. And I guess also my relationship with some of the companies that we've just spoken about, for example, they've always been collaborative. So I've always been involved in that creative process as a collaborator anyway, in terms of bringing my own life experiences or my reaction to the topic or the issue or the subject matter in the studio, and through improvisation or tasks I would help create and mould the show. So I guess in some ways I've always been a bit of a maker, even though I've predominantly been performing, but sort of it starts to reach a point where you kind of you become more and more interested in seeing where that relationship with steering a creative process can go.
And you've got a new work called Rockbottom that you're taking on a bit of a mini tour across the UK. You're off to 4 different locations over about a 5-week period, starting at the Place on the 12th of September. Tell us about this piece, because I've read a little bit about your work, and I'm particularly interested in some of the aspects around the human spirit and surviving what sometimes, as I've read, seems impossible, and about self-destructiveness and about happiness as well. All subject matters that are really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, what were we just talking about in terms of wanting to make that a step in terms of making your first full-length piece of work? The irony of that is that a life experience or a really, or a really powerful life experience happened simultaneously with that need or that desire to make that first step. So the two things sort of collided at the same time. So I wanted to make something, and then I went through quite a large, powerful experience in my own private life, which I started to feed into that. And yes, I guess over a few-year period, my mental health started to decline, and it became much more of a challenging situation to face. So that's why the show is called Rockbottom. I hit my own personal rock bottom, and then through that recovery process, I learned a great deal, and it then sort of brought me back to what's probably the largest part of my own identity, which is as a dance artist, and that need to make work about things that matter, or be in work that speaks to people. All of those things sort of emerged at the same time, and I began to make a show about everything that had just happened to me myself, in terms of emotionally and physically and spiritually, I suppose.
It sounds like, as you mentioned, this autobiographical piece is obviously very, very personal to your story. And I think, when it comes to mental health, it's great that actually this is a subject matter within the dance industry and more wider is actually talked about, and that work is created to reflect someone's experience who's been through this. I think it's very powerful to have brought this topic. And how did it feel for you in terms of creating the work based on your experience? What was it like in the studio for you?
It's not been easy. I'm not going to lie about that, but I don't think I ever really expected it to be. And I think also creative processes aren't easy. And I think if you're making a show about anything that's emotional, or if you're making a show about anything that's topical, there's a certain level of vulnerability and emotional energy that gets used between the people that are in the studio. So right back at the beginning, 3 years ago, when I first got my first Arts Council funding to research how to begin making it, we decided that we needed some kind of some artistic practice in order to make it, which is still ongoing, and is something that I'm in dialogue with the dance industry about. But how can you? Because I wanted to still make something that was a strong piece of art, which, from my perspective, is something that's still quite risky and personal and full of vulnerability. So I wanted to talk about my experience in a very personal way, but I also wanted to learn and make sure that I was also not breaking myself at the same time, that we were taking these risks safely. And then as the project's grown, that conversation with the dance industry and audiences has been really interesting, because at grassroots level it's just about you, yourself and the team. And then when you start to create it, and then you start to think about touring it, the conversation about the work that you're doing and how you keep not only yourself but your team and audiences safe when watching something that is particularly hard-hitting and triggering emotionally, you suddenly realise there's quite a big responsibility to performing that work to audiences. So there's been a massive amount of conversation with venues, audiences, and dance industries and the general public about how you do that, and the ongoing challenges of making work like this.
It's clearly a very serious piece of work, and creating any work for an artist is very revealing and does make you very vulnerable, because it's your creation. But also this added level, it's very brave to talk about your own experiences and your own rock bottom and your own challenges around mental health. That's an exceptionally brave thing to do.
Yeah, I guess I think people keep using that word. I mean, it just seemed to make sense to me that if I wanted to contribute to the challenges of mental health and the wide public conversation that we are, rightly so now, having about mental health, if I was going to contribute to that in any way, the only way, I think, and the way that I've been working a lot over the years with different companies, is to bring a part of myself to it. So it was a choice just to talk about it from a particular place. And also, I think if people know that they're watching something that's real, that also touches people in a different way. And I wanted to touch people so that we could open a more honest conversation around mental health.
Just to have that, to spark that dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to use my story to talk about the bigger picture of mental health. So it took a long time in the studio as well to work out lots of different scenes and mechanisms, theatrical mechanisms within the show, to share, to balance out my story, and then other scenes that drop out into the wider umbrella of mental health, so that there's a sort of people can watch the show and read their own life experiences into my story, as well as listen to my story as well. But the aim has been to use my story as a way to talk about it, really.
And Your story that you mentioned, obviously you don't want to sort of give away the whole show and the narrative for the show, but is there a sort of a glimpse into that story that you wanted to share, so audiences might think about, what it is that they might be coming to see, or is it something you want them to come to sort of without sort of knowing too much?
Yeah, I mean, I think my story is a solo man on stage, and from a gay man's perspective, there are scenes that drop in and out of you could call it gay culture, bringing in depression and anxiety, but that leading to self-destructive coping mechanisms such as addiction and then near-death experience. So all of those things are in there. So it's quite a powerful show. I mean, there are moments.
It's quite hard hitting, isn't it?
Irony and dark humour to give different perspectives. But like I say, I mean, there are scenes in it that are that open up, that talk about anything that people could relate to. So different audience members have come along, and even though it's not necessarily their story, they might be suffering a different mental health situation, or they might be in a different area of mental health. But something that I personally felt was that whatever area of mental health you might be boxed into, and given the title of that particular mental health situation, a lot of the emotional aspects of mental health are the same, or they cross over quite a lot. So I wanted that sense of vulnerability, isolation, loneliness, and that sort of internal struggle that I think a lot of people have. So people in lots of different people have reached out after the show, from lots of different walks of life, and reflected on how it's touched them and made them think about their particular situation, which is very different to the story that I've been telling. So I've been really happy that the show has worked in that way for people.
Absolutely, and to have that conversation, between audience members, they might, walk out of the studio and say something or share something with whomever's gone with them, or go home and feel more confident having that conversation they may not have felt they could have before. Perhaps reflecting on what they've seen, which would be, obviously something which we don't see that happens as a result of dance, but that impact that it can have in terms of really affecting audiences, not just in the theatre, but as they sort of go on with their lives. And it sounds like this is, as it's sort of billed as sort of painfully quite revealing, but you also talk about happiness as part of this narrative. Do you come round into your story sort of going full circle from the rock bottom and exploring what happiness means to you now or throughout your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't want the audience to leave depressed. I think I definitely wanted the audience to feel a sense of reality about the issues of mental health. I guess the seriousness of some of those issues, but I guess also the reality is, in terms of my story, is that I didn't die, I didn't pass away. So the full circle of the story and coming back, and that sort of hope about, what does the future look like, and giving yourself and the audience hope about what's in front of you. So I wanted to bring a sense of, positive metaphor as well. There are moments of the different metaphors throughout the show, so especially ending on one that's definitely much more positive.
And you also talk about the tenacity of the human spirit to survive. And as you mentioned, you didn't die, which is obviously great. So it sounds so glib, but I don't quite know what else to say, actually. And I think so many people, we all struggle with mental health issues at some point in our lives. And I know, a lot of dancers obviously struggle with mental health issues as well. Not necessarily always, cause and effect. It's not always, because you're a dancer or you're in the dance industry. It could be because of something external to the work that you do. How was it for you? Was it a combination of things within your life that was, challenging at the time?
What about mental health?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think my story's so much of an original one in some ways. I think at the time I was living in London as well, and I think in terms of the conversation around mental health, that modern world definitely always comes into it. And I think some of this sort of fine line between, especially as a dancer, this fine line between being passionate and obsessive about your career, and where are all those boundaries between your life and the artistic life. And I think being a performing artist, touring artist, sometimes that's really challenging, because so much of your life and your personal life and your emotional energy is wrapped up into the job that you do. So I think sometimes it's quite easy for the thin line to be very unclear. It's quite easy for everything to be going towards work and nothing else. I think just because the nature of the art form it demands so much of you, and if you want to do it well, then you put everything and more so into it. But as I've learned, I'm learning that that's not always the best thing for you as an individual. But I think as a culture, not just in dance, but now just with working culture, whatever sector you might be in, people are working. So we tend to, as a culture now, we seem to all have this mentality where we work to the point where we can snap a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly as you said, being a dancer is sometimes all or nothing almost in a lot of ways. I had a conversation as one of the podcasts that are coming out shortly with a dance psychologist who talks about many of the conversations that he has had with dancers about how difficult it is as a profession and as a lifestyle, because it is it does create your identity as a person, and those boundaries, even the ones that you mention in the normal sort of life outside dance, where does the boundaries of work and your life and who you are sort of where do they sit in this modern world? Exactly as you say, it's very, very challenging, and which is why I think mental health needs to be talked about more. And all industries, including dance, are making strides, and I think we just need more conversations and more honesty. And so it's great to see work being produced about such a raw story, and a story, as you said, that many people connect with for many different reasons, because everyone usually somewhere experiences the difficulties. Do you think there's anything in particular that the industry could be doing to help or to change so that it is less pressurized? Or I'm not sure what the industry can do to be different.
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of things come down to time and money and old cultures, and maybe just possibly it's time to reevaluate how we work as a culture and how we work with our performers, with our office team. How does everybody still manage to work towards the art without it becoming too much? And I think it's a really difficult thing to do, because everyone has a really different setup. But I think there are a lot of different versions and challenges for different people. I think people working in a full-time company might have a very different mental health challenge to a self-employed solo dance artist working in a community that spends a lot of time by themselves, working with lots of different vulnerable groups and running around trying to keep a lot of different sessions going. So I think everyone faces different challenges. And I think maybe the place to start is just maybe start to think about artistic practice, I guess. We were talking about dance theatre, and I think there are so many different versions of that now, and performers and dance artists are expected to have such a range of skills that they can bring, and I think it keeps backdating. So I think the pressures of what you need, the expectation of what you need in order to succeed, is already seen a lot further down the line in the training part now. So I think that people feel that pressure, and I think it's just I don't think it's rocket science. I think it's just about maybe rejigging and looking at how you work in the studio. If you are making emotional work, some thinking around how you might safeguard yourself as the director, but also the people that you're working with. Looking at artist practice, how you might excavate material from performers in a kind, human way. How you share that, how do they stay safe in that. I also think, we're really good about thinking about the physical body now, and that people put money into their budgets for looking after the artists' bodies. I think we need to start finding a way of, I know this is challenging, but also maybe finding a way of also adding mental health to the budget as well, and how
Absolutely.
So that people also have an opportunity to I don't know, see a counsellor or whatever that version might be in that context. That's obviously easier for people in a company setting. They might be able to start doing that. I think independent artists have a really challenging time because they're running around auditioning, trying to doing bits and bobs of this, that, and the other. I think a lot of the words that exist in being a dancer are slightly problematic. So in terms of perfectionism, and this sort of resilience training, that also brings up a lot of other stuff that I think it might be time to think about. How do we still work hard in a resilient way? How do we still build our resilience, but without all the negative emotional stuff as well? So I think
absolutely, it's a very so many great places to start there.
I do think there's a lot of things that can be tweaked. I don't think they're massive things, but I think it, in light of the fact that we're having this massive public conversation about it, the dance industry could probably, everybody could, and people are. It's not that people aren't.
Yes,
I just think that there's probably a lot further to go in terms of everybody having a healthier and happier experience.
As you say, not just physical, but also emotionally and mentally as well. And the challenges, as you say, a lot of dance companies are providing that type of support now, and the industry is working. But as you say, if you're a freelance dancer or dance artist or choreographer and you're by yourself a lot of the time, then it can be very isolating and you can feel very alone, and your interactions might be very different depending on whether or not you're regionally based, London based, or in major cities around the world. And that can have an effect as well, because it's not in any way the same. But my husband, he works from home by himself. It's very isolating, and I think when people think, you get to work freelance and independent, and actually you don't realize that there are so many factors that you never thought were going to be something you need to think about in terms of things like isolation and how that can make you feel. It's so I think life as a freelance dancer, with funding and opportunities to create and share work is so difficult in any case in this current times, that it'd be great if there was some sort of wider support there.
I mean, I think also like having everyone being more connected is probably a way as well, especially with with challenges of money and funding, and I think dance communities could maybe work at being more connected, so they stay connected more as an actual dance community, whether you're the community in London or whether you're a group of regional dancers in a different region in the UK. I think it's very easy to to be very separate on your own thing. And I think actually everyone probably needs to do the opposite and become a little bit more tight-knit so that you can help each other out, offer each other skill sharing sessions, keep each other's positivity up, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then when things are difficult, you've got a community of people around you rather than being part of a network, but you don't actually ever really connect. So I think there might be a lot of simpler ways that a lot of different regions around the UK can also connect. I mean, it'll be different for everybody, but I think it's something that I feel and I see.
I've heard it from other artists as well, Stuart. I think there is this need and this desire for a tighter, supportive dance community rather than the industry.
And I think people coming out, it must be terrifying for people coming out of conservatoires and universities as well and just trying to find their way. So I think what's challenging about it, I think, is there are so many different people at such different points of their career. Because I think also, I guess I fall into the mid-career category, brackets, whatever, but, that in some ways feels very unsupported in some ways if you're not, how do you keep everything going?
Yeah, there's so much to do, and then you've got to create something.
Exactly, and then if you've passed that point as well, you're further down the line, what is it for, then we're working against, ageism essentially, as well. So I think there's a lot of different things happening that present very different challenges
and opportunities for change. And thinking about some of the opportunities and some of the lessons as well. I noted you also create workshops for dancers and non-dancers, and I was reading that your approach focuses on sort of removing or addressing self-doubt, which is something of a bit of an interest, again, for myself. I'm quite fascinated with all these subject matters. But tell us, how do you sort of address this, that sort of lurking thing in the corner, the big self-doubt in working with dancers and non-dancers?
Well,
it's a big one.
It's difficult. I think some of the workshops that I've done is that whatever anybody trying to design some dance activity alongside Rockbottom whilst we've been on tour that basically can empower people. It took some thought, because I think you also want an experience where, whether you're a dancer or not a non-dancer, that whatever you're doing and whatever you're bringing to the table is absolutely valid. So I designed a workshop where we explored two different words that led to the feeling of empowerment, really. And so I kind of rejigged how I might lead a workshop like that. So it's not a technical class. It's more of a explorative and creative thinking kind of experience. So through conversation and the process that we developed, which was checking in to build trust and to see where everybody might be, talking about what we might think about and explore through conversation, and then we would move into movement exploration based on what we were all talking about. So there's a situation in the workshop where there isn't really there's no aesthetic expectation, and there's definitely no right or wrong. It's just more about everybody empowering themselves through something that they've contributed in the conversation, and then comes out through their body. So everybody's working within their own limitations, and the basis is to basically have fun and think about that. And then reflection, so then to come back and then reflect again through conversation to talk about that. And then it's just a simple process, and then we would explore another word, and it would be exactly the same thing. So we designed this workshop where we explored all the emotional aspects around moments of feeling powerless. And then we did the opposite, and we did powerful. And then the result was people felt empowered by the end of the workshop. So that's how we sort of designed some thinking around how people could be included, whether they were a dancer or a non-dancer.
I love that that word, empowerment, and feeling empowered. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think that's just it's always a magical feeling when you can have that, and to be able to help people feel that is wonderful. So just finally then, quickly, tell me about your tour. So you're coming into London on the 12th of September, and then you're heading to Birmingham Midlands Arts Centre, then down to Cornwall, and then over to Plymouth, which is, that's quite, I'm not the best geographical person, being an Aussie who seems to never know where I am in this country. But that sounds like an exciting tour. And then what's next for you after you finish up in Plymouth on the 9th of October?
Well, I mean, I would love Rockbottom to live on in some way, but I'm starting to think about exploring some new ideas, to make something that potentially could go alongside Rockbottom or to tour separately. So themes and ideas that have grown, and some of the wonderful people that we've met throughout the year, just trying to draw the dots really and make some connections about thinking about making something new, or at least exploring and researching something else that's grown out of this Rockbottom experience, really.
Well, that sounds like a story that has a next chapter to it, from rock bottom to where? Well, from rock bottom to touring around the UK, and hopefully some more. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Stuart. And I know this is a really personal story for you, so I really do appreciate you sharing this with us and with me. And I look forward to hopefully seeing Rockbottom at the place in London. And thank you. So just for those who are listening and want to find out more about Stuart and his work and his personal story, just go check out his website, stuartwaters.info, STUART waters.info. And the dates for his tour are the place in London on the 12th of September, which you can find at theplace.org.uk, Birmingham Midlands Arts Centre on the 2nd of October, and Truro College in Helford Theatre in Cornwall on the 8th of October, and University of Plymouth 9th of October. So anyone who has an interest in dance or dance theatre, or would like to see the Rockbottom story, get along to those 4 key dates. Thank you very much.
Don't forget to subscribe. We've got some incredible interviews coming up with principal ballerinas and renowned choreographers. We love dance and ballet, and we hope you'll love us. Join us on Facebook and Twitter.